Welcome to the museum, and welcome to the lives of great photographers, and welcome, Anne.
Thank you.
One of the things that we wanted this exhibition to be about was the fact that the collection is a historic collection. Although we've only been here for 26 years, here in Bradford at the National Media Museum, the collection is much, much older. We're part of the Science Museum, which is based in London, which at one time was part of a museum that was called the South Kensington Museum, which was in the late 19th century, was split in two, and one half became the Victoria and Albert Museum, and the other half became the Science Museum. And I would imagine that at that time, when this collection was being formed, that most of the curators were male, were interested in technology, scientists. This collection goes so far back. I mean, we really trace our pedigree back to the great exhibition of 1851 at the Crystal Palace. And so if this collection has been growing slowly, but surely over the years, and I'm sure that if you had said to those early curators of this collection, or you better be careful that you don't just have male photographers in this collection, they wouldn't have.
They wouldn't know what you were talking about.
Whereas nowadays, as curators, we're very conscious that we have to think about representing as many different aspects of photography as possible.
I mean, it's interesting that all of this, and correct me if I'm wrong, but it's all black and white apart from one Tony Ray Jones.
And the Burrows.
Oh, I've been corrected.
And the Burrows round the corner.
Well, let's carry on with this, okay, too. And that's within a photojournalistic context.
Yeah.
And is that because you stopped at a certain time, and so, I mean, is that because up until a certain time, the colour process didn't exist, or was that because, are you saying that, that there's that notion until, the British colourists or the American colourists like Stephen Shore and all them came along, colour wasn't, black and white was considered art and serious, and colour wasn't.
Actually, that is interesting because I hadn't thought about colour at all, not remotely. And actually, there's more colour photography. Steichen has two colour photographs in the show. Well, one's a half-tone, and another one's an early Carbro. But one is an early pictorialist photograph, and the other one's a fashion photograph. So it was obvious to use colour for the fashion photography for Vogue. And but no, colour just wasn't on my radar at all. But I do wonder if maybe until the 70s, when the Tony Ray Jones photograph came along, it wasn't so commonplace. It was there, but
well, it was kind of
maybe not so commonplace.
The amateur, the 60s, we all have 60 slides, define our childhood in a certain colour, but it's never represented within the history of photography.
It's just one of those things about this idea about a perfect exhibition, and it's just one of the things that I thought this was a really interesting exhibition when I was working on it, because there were just so many issues like that, where you'd kind of think, okay, who are we going to include, and who we're not going to include, and why not, and the way it takes shape and it takes form. But then it does mean that you have to make a decision between, and
so dead was one criteria.
Dead was one.
Size and shape and frames was another.
But not quality. Quality was no
problem.
Quality
was like, it was taken, it had to be at a quality threshold. And the other criteria, which I think is really interesting, is it came from the National Media Museum's archive. So none of this work has been borrowed from any other museum.
Yeah.
So if you want to say something about your collection?
I spent most of my working life here at the museum, fetching and carrying parts of the collection for visiting researchers, some of whom are with us this evening, and we're happy to do that. So we get to see lots of the parts of the collection on a daily basis, but for somebody else. We fetch it and carry it for somebody else. And for me, this was maybe the first time that I got to sit down myself and to go through all of the Camerons for this exhibition with nothing else in mind, and to go through all of the Talbots, all 6,000 of them, and to go through all of the Fentons, all 1,000 of them, and all of the Tony Ray Jones, and with this exhibition in mind. And so what was the question? I forgot.
About the criteria and the importance of the actual collection that you have here in Bradford in the Media Museum, which I think a lot of people don't understand. I mean, I'm always banging the drum about the collection, saying it's the jewel in the crown, it's a world-class collection, and people maybe don't understand the importance of what you actually have here.
Absolutely. One of the things that I think has been really good about working on this exhibition is that not only have you got some of the rarest albumin salt prints by a long dead photographer like Fenton, but you've also got these little 10 by 8 gelatin prints from what was an old newspaper press collection. The single biggest collection of photographs that we have, the Daily Herald photograph collection, and I mean, most of the photographs in there are of no, you know, they're not all Kappas and they're not all of the Spanish Civil War, and most of them are of people that their photograph only appeared in that photograph once because they rescued a kitten from up a tree or something, but it's the best thing. I think it's one of the best things we've got. It's
the Daily Herald archive.
The Daily Herald. It's a real workhorse of a collection. You know, those photographs would have been thrown across desks and would have had mugs of tea put on top of them in the 1920s. Collections like that all up and down the country were being thrown out because people were thinking, well, you know, we don't need photographs of the Spanish Civil War now, you know, but we do. And it's about well over 2 million prints. As I said, it's a huge collection. We struggle to store it. And if we hadn't collected it, we'd have no storage problems at all at the moment. Do you know what I mean? And yeah.
Does anyone have any questions at this point in time? Anything that they want to ask us?
I'm really interested in this question of selection because it obviously was a big job for you, and you've only got 4 or 5 pictures per photographer. So did you have a system actually? I mean, I noticed with Bill Brandt you have chosen pictures from different periods in his career. So is that something you were concerned to do?
So we decided to try and get as many photographers in as possible, but that meant less work was going to be on display. So then I thought, well, okay then, so do we just pick the finest or the most beautiful or the most famous photographs by that photographer and say, here is their best work, the best known work? Or do we maybe try and show something that's less well known? I tried to do that wherever possible. And then, of course, when you started looking at the lives of the photographers and maybe how many times they chopped and changed and did different things at different stages in their career, and then you'd sort of think, well, so do I try to cover all those different stages? And so I tried to do that, and sometimes it worked, and sometimes it didn't. Fenton, it worked because, you know, we've got his early Crimean work, and then some of his a portrait of some royalty, and then some of his landscape work that he's really famous for, and then something that's maybe just a little bit more aesthetically pleasing in general, alongside his portrait, of course. But so we tried. I had this kind of thing where I thought, if I've got 4 frames per photographer, roughly, which is not much, yeah. And we thought one of them's a portrait, if we have it, and then something that they're well known for, something that they're less well known for, but which is of a high standard, and then maybe something that reflected some aspect of their life, even if only just on a really, really subliminal level. And a good example of that might be George Davison, because there's a portrait that he took of a woman and child, but it's actually of his well, I say wife and daughter. I don't think they ever actually married, you know, but certainly, you know, like his partner and their daughter. And so wherever possible, we tried to kind of, you know, just make a passing reference to an aspect of their life. And after quite a few discussions with my colleagues, we decided that it'd be better to give the exhibition some kind of shape and form. So we began to break the photographers down into different categories. So there's one very small section called Pioneers. There's only 2 photographers, both from the 19th century, both men, Louis Daguerre and William Henry Fox Talbot. But that really is just to set the scene for the invention of photography, because we really wanted this exhibition to be about photography, about photographers, about people picking up a camera and going out into the world for whatever reason and capturing images. So we thought it's quite a nice place to start with the beginning. And if you're a pioneer, then that maybe means that you deserve to be known as a great photographer, and so you merit a place in this show. But then we decided that the other sections, we saw that when we looked at the way the exhibition was forming, that there were people who were purely artists. They just wanted to use photography as a form of expression, and they weren't remotely interested in selling their work. They weren't employed by anybody. That, you know, you have people who specialize as photojournalists or documentary photographers, and so that seemed like the key areas, and so that they became the sections in the exhibition.